Welcome to the Soccer Coaching Podcast, where we will discuss all things that impact soccer coaching across all levels and ages. Please listen, enjoy, and share your thoughts on the discussions at the Soccer Coaching Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Soccer Coaching Podcast. My name's Scott and I'm here with our co-host Mark as well. So we were thinking long and hard about what we could talk about for our first episode, and both Mark and I agreed that maybe as a starting point we could look at the ingredients that we felt would make for a really great soccer coaching session. So not looking too much at the detail of a session, this is just the headline bits and pieces that we think if you put some of this stuff in your session, hopefully it would be an effective session for you as a coach. It would be effective for the players, and most importantly, probably be enjoyable. Sound fair?
Yep, I like it.
So we weren't looking at a particular number, but having kind of had a bit of a brainstorm through it, we kind of got to 10 different things. But you made the point, Mark, about some of this stuff may cross over a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. I think like there's probably, as we go through this, there'd be one or two that you could probably put together. But I think actually pulling them out separately, there's probably some key points in there. And I think the other thing that's important here is, right, we're amateur coaches.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. Okay, I'm a very amateur coach. And obviously we get to see our players twice a week. So our thinking here is how we can get the best out of those kind of 2 sessions or even sometimes just the 1 session a week, how we can make it most effective for our players. So maybe some of the listeners will have their kind of players more. So maybe they have a slightly different view. So I think it's always interesting, perhaps if there's some feedback in terms of what we rate as the kind of top 10, it'd be good to hear. But this is certainly our view based on the time that we get the limited time we get with our players. Is that fair?
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, I think that's a good point to make. Yeah, and I think also we've tried to look at an overview, so some of this stuff really could fit in if you've got once a week, if you're seeing them on a Saturday for a grassroots game on a Sunday, or if you've got an academy team that you're seeing 4 times a week plus a game on a Saturday. So hopefully some of the stuff can transcend all, but you're right, it won't necessarily work for everybody. All right, should we make a start then?
Yeah, and I think just one final point, if you don't mind. I think the other thing is that some of these items or things that we pull out could also apply for matches as well, right?
100%.
And I think that's the thing. We, as coaches, we always think about the kind of developing the players and then they're playing on a Sunday. But the kind of some of these things that we talk about, that certainly will be relevant for match day as well as training sessions.
Good point. Yeah, and I'm sure we'll do a match day podcast at some point. But if you're really thinking about training as long-term development for the players, then hopefully you're looking at match and extension training in the first place. But yeah, it's a good point.
Definitely.
All right, so they're not in an order really. I guess if they are in order, it's probably just as you might work through chronologically rather than priority. But the first one we brought up, which is not the most sexiest of ones, but it's true. Number 1, we got planning. So whether you like it or not, some people love planning, some people hate it. I do think it's probably fair to say that if you do plan your session out, you're more likely to have a good session. Yeah. So the kind of things you're thinking about here with planning is actually the session plan itself. So what would that look like? And again, there's a whole variety of different structures and different ways in which you can structure your session, that's for sure. Whether you're looking at a whole part whole, or whether you're going for constant variable random or something else completely. How you start with a warm-up, how you finish your sessions. There's a whole lot there to be considered. So we're not saying which is right, but actually having a plan's got to be a help. And within that, really looking at, I think the big thing that people can sometimes forget to put in their sessions is the challenges. Now, they might be team challenges, looking at, okay, what do we want to achieve for the session today, and what will those team challenges look like? Maybe unit challenges, if you're looking at working with your back players or your midfield players or your front players or your goalkeeper. And obviously individual challenges as well, where you can get your differentiation out there and you can hopefully hone the session to make sure that every single player is getting the most out of it. That you can use STEP for that, so looking at how you might adjust the space you're using, the time the players have, the equipment or the number of players in a particular practice, and also how you progress the session along. So again, to making sure that you've got options there to maybe scale it up if it looks like the players are getting on top of it pretty quickly, or also dial it down if it looks like it's a struggle. And again, might need to adjust that for individuals rather than the whole team or particular units. Yeah. And I think just the final point on planning, I guess, is the unexpected. And I know back in my early days, if I didn't have all 10 boys or all 15 boys turn up or something, I'd be like, oh no, can't cope, it's all gone wrong.
Panic stations, right?
100% panic stations, yeah, and you kind of just thinking on the spot, and it was never good. So either having a session in which actually the numbers don't matter too much and you can be completely flexible, or having a session where you thought, okay, I build it for 10 or 12 or 14 or 16 players, but actually if I only get 9, 11, 15, it's still going to run fine. Or if I get an extra player for any reason, which can happen, or if someone gets an injury during the session or has to pull out for 5 or 10 minutes, then it doesn't kill the session. I'm not there scratching my head thinking, there's nothing left to do.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I remember the dreaded odd numbers, right? Odd number of players. Yeah. It's kind of like it seriously used to kind of panic me a little bit when I first started. But actually, I think you kind of, as you get more experience and you learn these things, you start to really actually appreciate things like if you got odd numbers. It's a great challenge for the boys. You can do different things. You can start doing overloads that are a lot more easy with odd numbers. You can do kind of different things, and even if you're doing group of pairs, you can make a group of 3. It's not really going to ruin the training session. So I think the unexpected and thinking that through is important. But I think in general planning, right? I can't remember the classic phrase that used to be drummed into me when I first started working. If you failed to plan to fail, I think it is, or something like that. I think it's just important, right? I used to. I generally try to spend as much time planning the session as the length of the session. In fact, probably planning takes longer. I know that there's many times in a week my wife's asking me what you're doing, and I'm telling her I'm planning the session. She's like, "You're doing that last night and the night before." So it's kind of like, I think it's just
stop believing you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's a critical piece, right? You've got to be ready for the session. If you're not ready for the session, then it's not fair on the players. It's not fair on the parents who have bought the players. It's just you've got to be ready. You've got to be ready and planned and ready and ready to go, basically. Yeah,
I agree. And I guess also for confidence, I think when I've gone with a plan, I mean, sometimes you can kind of get by with that one, have a loose idea and it kind of works, but you're kind of riding the wings of luck there a little bit.
Yeah.
Where if you go with a plan, when I go down to a session and I know what I'm going to do and I know I can deal with the variables that may come up and I can adjust it accordingly for the different players, I'm just ready and I feel like, I look forward to those sessions and they do run better. And you can see the players enjoy it more as well and get more out of the sessions.
Yeah.
However much we may or may not love planning, it is a vital part of it, and we couldn't do the top ingredients without putting planning up there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
totally all right. Agree. Well, that's the first one, and what we'll, again, on all these topics, like all these points, I think we'll look at these in more detail. So we're just throwing out the headlines for now, but if you want a good session, make sure you plan it.
Yep,
number
absolutely.
1.
Okay, so moving on to number 2, then I think. We've got clear theme here, and I think this is probably related to planning a little bit. Again, you could probably put those together, but having a clear theme is obviously critical if you want to maximise your kind of time with the players, maximise what they get out of it. You need to have a clear theme, and obviously that's linked to the actual session plan. And then generally with the theme, be it maybe you have a passing kind of theme, maybe you have an attacking theme, maybe it's a defending theme, or maybe it's kind of something different. It's then having the kind of ingredients that go into that theme. So if it's a passing, for example, are you thinking about perhaps keeping possession and attacking at the right time, or making the pass at the right time? Are you thinking about perhaps the players finding space, helping them find space? And it's really using that theme throughout your session. So all the individual practices or games that you have in there, how are they linked to that theme and how that comes through? And I think, as I said, it's obviously having those kind of ingredients that make the drill, the practices what they are, but also having all the coaching points. It helps, having that right theme, it helps you kind of have the coaching points up front, and you have them at the forefront of your mind when you get into the session. So it's kind of critical, and I think the big discussion actually, and I spoke to different coaches around this, is do you tell the players what the theme is up front, or do you actually just kind of talk them through, this is what the session's going to look like, and then maybe at the end of the session you ask them what was the kind of theme all about? And I know when I first started, I used to I would tell the players what the theme is. This is what we're working on this week, so they're aware of it. But actually, I think as I've become more experienced and more kind of perhaps educated, and maybe less amateurish, then I generally don't tell the players now. I kind of hopefully the session will bring it out, and they'll be able to tell us at the end what we've been kind of working on.
That's a great point, and maybe that's a general thing about when we first start coaching. We give the players all the information up front, don't we? It's not just on the thing, but everything. But you're dead right. And if you can do a session in which maybe the first practice or game that you do hints at what it might be, and the players then have to come in and think, okay, what is it going to be? Well, then you're working their cognitive skills as well as whatever the session's doing itself. So, yeah, definitely. And
I think the other thing linked to the theme is, and something that I definitely haven't mastered is actually, if you're thinking about a season. And then planning throughout that season, how do you think about your themes on a week-to-week basis, right? Because I try not to have a theme based on last week's match. So if something went wrong in the match, I generally would treat that as a noise rather than the boys not developing they really should do. But it's difficult not to react to the last game and have a theme based on that. So if, for example, we're conceding goals from corners, would you have a session, your theme is defending corners? Personally, I wouldn't, but it's how do you plan that theme over the season? And this is probably a longer discussion than for here, but it's a difficult one,
podcast now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a difficult one.
Well, that's a good point there, because if we go back to planning on number one, then actually, you're talking about a curriculum, aren't you? And saying, okay, yes, we want a theme for this particular session, but this particular session should fit into a bigger picture of long-term development, whether that's the last 6 weeks, the whole season, or maybe 6 years, but you don't want to necessarily take a scattergun approach where you jump from theme to theme based on how your team did last week, because there's too many variables in football, especially at the youth level where you're playing different teams with different players. Even the same team can have different players the following week in it. So, I think it's a dangerous approach to react to the week before. We've probably all done it, and we probably will continue to do it in some way, shape or form. But if you've got your curriculum in place, and actually, even if it's a loose curriculum, you say, like, we're going to do passing, defending, attacking, rotate that every 3 weeks. I mean, that's pretty loose. But if it was that, we stick to those principles. And if you've had a few weeks where you've been conceding goals through, maybe from set pieces, or teams coming through the middle of you, or whatever it might be, then okay, you tailor that particular session on defending around something that might suit that. So you're not reacting completely to what's gone on previously, but you've got some flexibility in your curriculum to do a bit of that if necessary.
Yeah. I think the other interesting thing is how we actually how often do you repeat that theme as well?
Yeah, good
so
point.
Do you have it for 2 weeks to help the players kind of understand it and then really kind of digest it and develop, or do you kind of introduce it maybe 4 weeks later or 8 weeks later or something? I think again there's something that I've not really mastered or kind of maybe put enough thought to is how often you repeat that theme and when you do it.
Yeah, and there's no hard or fast rule, is there? I'm a big fan of repeating a session again, not in the following week, because it looks maybe that the players need some, want something different. But I think if you go back to session maybe within 3 or 4 weeks, there's 2 things that are quite interesting. Firstly, what do the players remember from the session? Because if it's been any good, they might remember some of it. Yeah. Secondly, I think what you tend to find is once you get back into the swing, the players pick up from where they were off quite quicker, so you get more out of it second time round. Yeah. It doesn't always work that way, but it can work that way. So, and it doesn't have to be a good session before necessarily, because you might get more out of it second time round and makes it a better session. But I think reinventing the wheel every single week and then, going back maybe 12 weeks later to do something again is probably too long. Yeah. And I don't, we see it at academies, we see it at some of the academies we go to and see the way actually they have 12-week cycles of programs. So the players will do one thing 1 week and won't repeat again for 12 weeks later, and I'm not judging it, but it seems like a long gap between there. Although, to be fair, the boys do pick it up pretty quickly from what we've seen. But I think that's a good point. And you've got, and maybe it's an ages and stages thing. So what age the players are at and what stage they're at may depend on how quickly you revisit something. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I think summarise on theme, I think it's obviously a critical piece. Getting that into your session plan and building the ingredients around it is important, right? 100%. on that, I think the two things you mentioned there, well, the first thing you mentioned was the coaching points, because those coaching points, hasn't come from an awarding body manual. It's got to come from the things that you want to see as the coach of that particular team. So if you're working on on pressing the ball, well, what does that look like for you? What would you like it to look like for your players? Because ultimately it is their game and it is their team and it's their performance in the matches, but they're gonna reflect the things that you're helping bring out in the training sessions. So if you want to see your players pressing the ball quickly and getting sideways on, or timing their challenges to win the ball back at the right time, or if that's the coaching points you're looking for, well, put that in the training plan, put that in the theme you're looking for, and that's what the session should be bringing out. Now, someone else might have a different version of pressing the ball in a different way completely, but I think if you highlight that yourself, then you know what you're looking for, and that's a massive help in the session. And when you don't see it, you can kind of think, okay, I know I need to be working on a little bit more, and if I do see it, fantastic, I can highlight that and say that's what I'm looking for. Especially if you've got maybe assistant coaches, because then you're on the same page, because their version of pressing, or tackling or shooting might be different to yours. So if you kind of highlighted the points, then you're on the same page looking for the same thing. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think that's another podcast, right? Assistant coaches, how you best utilise assistant coaches. And the final point on the theme, I think, is just the why in there, and put it in there as well. Like in the theme, okay, so if you want your team to press or pass, why? Why are you doing it? So the question to the boys is, okay, why are we going to press like this? Why are we going to get sideways? And why are we going to do this, close the space down quickly? Because again, if the players can understand the why, not just the how, then actually they're much more cognitively capable of doing that, in the randomness of a game, than they might be just in a training session. So I think, and adding the why into the theme and getting back into your plan, I think is a massive thing, because you keep asking the players rather than tell them, it's all the answers straight away. Keep asking them, why are we doing this? Then if they get that, then I think that makes a massive difference in how that learning gets embedded. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Have I got number 3?
You have indeed, yes.
Fantastic, because this is my probably my favourite thing, maybe because it involves the least amount of coaching. But I don't know what age this may stop, but for me, if you don't do number 3, I think you're missing a trick, I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to say much about this all the time, but I think this is the one where I'll pin my hat on this and say, guys, if you're not doing this, I think you're missing a trick. So for us, number 3 is free play. So having free play as part of your session. Now, I get the fact that actually you may be limited for time and space, and if you're sharing an artificial piece of grass, or you've got time limits on your training sessions, it's hard to squeeze in some free play because every minute counts. But we've used this quite well with our players. We tend to train first on our facilities. So say training starts at 9 o'clock, we'll run a free play session from about 8:45 in the mornings. So players can turn up 15 minutes early. We'll literally just put out some small-sided games, mark out some small pitches with some small goals, 3v3s, 4v4s, get down and just play. Playground kind of rules. Two things happen again. One, players come on time. Actually, they come early. Yeah. Usually they're about 8:30 in the mornings these days. Want to get the free play. Maybe it's the best part of the session,
right?
yeah, it's the best part of the session. But it's great to observe as a coach, because you kind of get to see who's up for it today, who's not 100%. They get all the quarrels out of the way. You get all the silliness done, and the social side kind of comes out of that. Hasn't impacted on your session at all. The boys have come to play some football, so they're getting themselves worn out. If you keep those numbers down, then it's hard work. The boys are running around and working out, the players, I should say. We've got boys, so I keep saying boys, but the players, it can, boys or girls who are playing, they can turn up and just kind of blow some steam off straight away for 15-20 minutes, and then when you bring them into your session, they're having their drink, you can have a talk, introduce the session or whatever you're going to do first, and I just think it gives them a clearer mind and a great start for the session. And if you're really creative with it, you can give them some ownership over the free play. So, we've got younger ones, I guess. The under 10s will be capable of this, but the under 7s, I think still need some structure, really. But there'd be nothing to stop us with the under 10s in putting down a pile of cones, putting out some of those small samba goals, and saying, boys, set up as you want. The only rule is you can't have more than 3v3 or 4v4 or something, so they don't go crazy with it, but you go and sort out the game you want to play. And then they've got to organise themselves, they've got to sort the teams out, they've got to put the cones in the right space, make the pitch the size they want it, put the goals where they want it, blah, blah, blah. And all that kind of ownership and that responsibility bit that, again, I think, that cognitive side of what we do as coaches, you've got to look for every opportunity in which you can evolve, you can add on that and help the players build on their abilities to do that kind of stuff. But you see leaders coming out there and organisers thinking about stuff and actually showing them that it's not just about the coach, it's not the coach's show, it's about the players. So free play sounds really simple, and it should be simple. Personally, I'd keep the coaches out of it. Just give them the time and the equipment and try and find that. And even if you haven't got the time before the session, I would still spend the first 10 minutes just doing free play.
Yeah, I unfortunately, I couldn't agree more, to be honest with you. This was I think this was a real kind of eye-opener for me. It's something that I remember when we first started coaching together, and we never used to use free play. And when you kind of mentioned it and introduced it, it was like, oh my God, why do we not ever kind of use this? I think it's just the best thing, right? There's a few things that it allows you to do. Firstly, whilst the boys are playing, you can get set up for the session and get ready for the session. Think through the kind of final tweaks in terms of what you need to do. You can get any practices ready, any cones out and things like that. I think the boys have fun. They enjoy it. That gives them a positive attitude when you're ready to start your session. I think. Thirdly, it takes the edge off the boys, of the players, for want of a better phrase, right? It means that they're just a little bit puffed out and not quite so hyper, because under 10s, under 7s, under 8s are very lively. Let's put it that way. So I think it just takes the edge off it. You can also watch, and you can, as you said, you can see who's kind of really up for it, who's not up for it. Coaches don't need to be involved. In fact, I actively encourage the coaches that I work with not to be involved. Just let the boys manage it. If someone gets upset, let the boys kind of manage it. If it's dangerous or if they're injured or hurt, then you clearly need to be involved. But just if there's little arguments, let the players deal with it. Right? It's almost like a playground kind of activity, and I just think it's just fantastic. And not all. And I think the other thing is, right, not all players arrive at the same time. You might have 6 players arriving at 8:30, 6 players arriving at 8:45, and at least they're doing something, and they're doing something they enjoy, and you can just add players into the session. I think the one interesting thing, I'm going to put you on the spot here, something we haven't spoken about actually. Could you do free play on a Sunday morning before a match as the players turn up, or why wouldn't you do it? Put it that way.
Very good question. Never thought about it, but that's a really good question. My gut feeling instinctively is no.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think why now.
Yeah.
I think on game day, mate, and it's probably me rather than the players, I like the organisation structure of something that just kind of, it's quite very organised, and we kind of follow a process, no new information, kind of keep the same thing. My slight worry with free play is it's a great opportunity for the boys to kind of explore their own little space in their own way. Is that a bit too far on game day? It may be because their boys are still quite young, our players. But with slightly older players, maybe you could do that. We have introduced playing small-sided games before the match.
Yep.
So we do that now. The keeper goes off and gets warmed up. We have the keepers, but the one that's only goal to start will go and get warmed up, and then the players left will play a little small-sided game. So we do, but it's coach-centred in the sense we're running that a little bit, Although we're not really involved. They just play a 3v3 or 4v4, whatever it's going to be. You could certainly try and let us know how it goes. I'm up for that.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
I'm actually thinking about doing it for under 10s because I know that
Why would you do it?
Well, I think it just it just creates that positive atmosphere before the game. Kind of puts them in the right frame of mind. It lets them kind of socialise and
takes the edge off. Maybe
it just gets them. Maybe they're also playing football, right? Well, I do agree that before games I like it to be structured. We do the same things each week. We generally go through the same process, so the boys they understand it. They know what's coming. There's no kind of surprises. They're ready for the game. But actually, could you do free play before?
The more I think about it, the more I think it might be worth trying it. It's one of those, isn't it? Yeah. And I wonder how much of my reservations doing it is me. Rather than the actual, the lack of control and stuff like that, because we all talk a good game about long-term development and about, making sure that the game is essential training. But when we go to matches, we want to do what the boys perform the best, And you kind of think, well, if I'm going to relinquish some of that stuff that I think is going to help them get there, am I prepared to do that? But the reality is, until you try some of these things, you just don't know. I'm up for giving it a go if you are.
I think I'll try it.
Okay,
and
you
I'll
want to try
report
first?
back. I'll report back.
That's one. Okay, let us know how it goes.
However, if we lose, is that problematic if we lose?
You'll be blaming it, won't you?
Yeah, exactly. Fair point.
Last point on free play, just quickly, because I think it's important to share this. Now, obviously, clubs run differently. With our grassroots club, we have a tiered system, so a stream system, because that's the league we're in, asks us to do that, requires that. So we've got about 30 odd players across 3 different teams, and they are ranked, so it's an A, B and C. We don't call them that, but it's A, B and C. You can argue about that as much as you like, but that's the way it is, because we have to for our leagues. But free play is mixed, so which I think is another great thing here. So whoever rocks up goes up and gets on a pitch and starts playing, so you've got A's and B's and C's all mixed up. We actively try and do that. It doesn't always work, but we try and do that. You do need the coaches on board, and you need the players kind of there to do it. But I think it's brilliant, because most of these guys are all mates from school and stuff, and they want to play with their mates, they don't really care about the team thing. They just want to play with their mates. So I think, again, if you don't do it, or you do it, and you've got the opportunity there to use it as an opportunity to mix the boys around a little, or the players around a little bit, then I think that's worth doing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that by all the players being together, right, it kind of takes the preciousness, if that's even a word, but it takes it away from I'm in the A team, you're in the B team, you're in the C team kind of thing. Yeah. And if players do need to move between teams because the players develop at different speeds, and then that also can help. So if you ever have to go through that
definitely,
kind of
and
process.
as a coach, you get to see the other players, don't you, as well? Exactly. It's quite good. So, you see it. You see the boys and how they're getting on and stuff, and it keeps it feel like a squad feel rather than individual teams. So brilliant. All right, thanks very much. Next one then. We're on number 4, are we?
Yeah, we are. Yeah. So technical work. So
this is a bit of you, isn't it?
Yeah, this is kind of big for me, and I think this is one we may kind of have some different views on, to be honest. And I know we've had kind of lots of discussions about this in the past. So for me, technical work is one of the most important, if not the most important, part of the session. Every week, I kind of dedicate at least kind of 15 minutes to kind of ball mastery. And some of that's opposed and some of that's unopposed. In fact, probably most of it, to be fair, is unopposed. I just think having that technical aspect to training is just critical, right? I think you need to do that to start to do more advanced kind of games and advanced practices. I think you need to have that that kind of basic technical work in there to kind of help the players develop. Now, I think there's a lot of discussions around unopposed practice. I personally think there's a place for unopposed practice in a session. If 100% of my session was unopposed, I would be greatly concerned. In fact, I probably wouldn't. I probably wouldn't be coaching, actually. But I think unopposed, it just creates that real high repetition, right? And I think even if it's kind of ball mastery, kind of doing different skills, or if it's a kind of passing, I know with my under 8s, I've done a lot of kind of basic passing. We've done 10 minutes of passing back and forth to each other because they didn't have that basic kind of control and first touch, and that we done it for kind of half a season. It kind of really helped them. But then generally I try to move into opposed as well. So we would do ball mastery, lots of different kind of skills, lots of different parts of the foot, lots of turns, and then I'd introduce the kind of opposed practice whereby you have to keep the ball from your opponent, kind of thing. That kind of practice. So what you're learning, you're then kind of putting into practice, and it becomes maybe a bit more variable rather than a constant practice. I think the challenge is to keep it fun, and I think that's one of the things that I can see you're kind of desperately ready to jump in and comment on. But I think if you're enthusiastic, you're challenging the boys to do different things, I think that you can keep it fun. I don't think you can do it for too long, and I know some of the professional academies do it for longer, and they're obviously a kind of more experienced on some of these things. But I definitely think there's a place in a session for some unopposed practice.
Yeah, no, I know you do, and you're a big advocate of this, and I think you've done wonders with your team around this kind of stuff. Now, I don't disagree, I honestly don't. And you're right, the academies maybe have 6 hours a week with their boys, and spending 20 minutes a session or half an hour of each session, they've got the time to do that. If you've got an hour on a Saturday with your players, you might not focus so much on the technical side of the game. You may, but you may not. Or you may focus the whole session on that, I don't know. But the two things you kind of mentioned there, well, one for me is transference. I think, if you're going to do the technical work, and it is important, without the basic fundamental ability to manipulate the ball, your team's going to struggle, individually or collectively. So you got to, you need that first touch, you need that control, you need to be able to work the ball, move the ball, and particularly the foundation phase, that should be the priority. And I don't disagree with that. What I see a lot, or what I see often, is unopposed, cone-based ball skill practice, where you're kind of giving the players a whole bunch of skills solutions to problems that they may or may not face. And I think if you're doing it because you want the boys or the players to be good on the ball, then you kind of got a justified reason for doing it. But if you think you're going to teach the players a set of skills that they can then pull out in the moment, when those skills are being taught in a completely unopposed or slightly interfered kind of way, I've not seen it transfer as of yet, and I'm happy to be corrected on that one.
Yeah.
And the second point is keeping it fun. Now there are some players that love unopposed practice, love doing the Joe Cole turns, the Cruyff still, all that, and they love it. And they give them a 10x10 space and let them rock around doing that. They'll love it, and pretty good. They're not always the ones that can do it in the game, though. And actually, sometimes it's the players that look a bit ropey doing it in the 10x10 space with no one around them that actually pull it off in a match, because they've just got that thing about that action perception coupling where they can kind of sense when to pull it off in the game at the right times.
Yeah.
So technical works on our list I think justifiably. It's just a case of, I guess, the delivery and execution of that in your session. Yeah. So it can transfer, it's fun, and it does what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I think even when I'm doing kind of ball mastery, I can see some of the boys are kind of more into it than others. The enthusiasm. I kind of try and break out the 15 minutes, and we might do 2 or 3 minutes of kick up challenge. Who can do the most kick ups? And you can see some of the boys that just kind of love that, right? They just kind of jump all over it, and they're kind of like, you can see them counting out their kick ups, and others are like, they've got their kind of head down a little bit. So you have to really kind of get into those players a little bit and really try and encourage them and challenge them to see what can they beat the record they had last time out. And then the ones that are, I guess, at the other end that are enjoying it, and how you need to push those, right? Can you do more kick ups than the coaches? The answer's obviously no, but it's like that kind of thing, right? And really kind of challenge them. But I just think, I think we can have another session on opposed versus unopposed. So I won't go into any more detail on that. But I think, generally speaking, technical work for me is just a critical part of your session. Your boys, you need to kind of help the players develop technically. That's a critical part.
Quick question then, when do you do your technical work with your players? Is it the same part every session, or do you do it at different times of the session?
Mix it up, actually.
Do you?
Generally, I would say it's generally at the front or the middle, because later on in the session we would probably do more small-sided games, and then maybe finish with a bigger game and a fun ending. But so it'd be more around the start after free play, or we would do an activity after free play and then do some technical work, something like that, yeah.
Okay, super stuff. Number 5, physical literacy. So this is a tricky one, because I don't think you can't put it in there, because I think it's important. Whether or not it's actually a standalone element is debatable again, but I think it would be a mistake to overlook it as have it in your thought process when you're planning a session out. And I think it can be overlooked sometimes. So what by this we mean, you're looking at the acceleration, the balance, coordination, speed of the players, those physical attributes that are going to allow them to do the things that you want them to do, and usually turn a technical ability into like something they can actually, beyond the skill, but actually something they can actually do in a game. And there's different ways you can approach this, and I've seen it done in a whole range of different ways. You can have standalone physical literacy stuff. So, I've seen skipping ropes, I've seen assault courses, tag games, all different ways in which you can do things without a ball that aren't football, that can develop certain things, and I think they're great. But also you can embed it within the practice itself. So, you can use the game itself and work on speed or acceleration or strength. So there's different ways you can do it. But I think if you're going to embed it, it probably goes back to the points around the clear theme and the coaching points. So what are your coaching points, and also what's the physical literacy within that particular coaching point. So what you're looking for. So if you're doing defending exercise and you're looking for strength, maybe you're looking to hold up the ball, hold the player off. So what does strength look like? How can you get that? What should the body shape be? How should the player be using their physique to be able to make that particular physical literacy stand out for them? Or if you're doing a standalone practice, okay, is this the best possible way in which I can do so? I'm going to spend 15 minutes doing a physical literacy activity. Is this going to marry up with what my theme is? So I think just having it as an ingredient is important. There's probably a lot of flexibility to how you use it. The only thing I would say is just making sure that whatever one you're focusing on, it kind of marries up with the theme of your session.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting one, physical literacy, and the reason I say that is it's probably the only practice where you actually encourage the coach not to have a ball. Right? I think there's some of the things that I've seen that you can do without a football, the tag game or the tails, fox and tails game. I think is great for twisting and turning, for scanning and things like that, and those kind of things are great. And probably for 10 minutes at the beginning of a session, I think it's really good. And there's certain, it comes down to the age of the boys or players you're coaching. So if you've perhaps got under 5s, under 6s, under 7s, it's something that you may want to embed in your practices. When you get to under 10s, under 11s, maybe you do less of that, and actually you would hope that perhaps some of the small-sided games brings that out. I don't know. It's not something I would say that for my under 10s, for example, we spend a lot of time doing this, and maybe we should spend more, but we don't spend a lot of time on this, and perhaps it's more focused for the under 5s, under 6s, under 7s. I don't know. It'd be interesting to know. Maybe other people have got different views on this. I'm not sure.
I think you're dead right, and I don't know that it's something that's discussed enough, maybe, and looked at enough. We just kind of rely on the actual natural physical development of the players to kind of sort itself out, right? But if I think about the teams we coach now, you can see this. Some boys are more coordinated than others. Some boys have got acceleration than others. I mean, I guess the younger they are, the age difference means a bit more. So 10 months when you're under 7s is big different compared to 10 months when you're under 16s, right?
Yeah.
Age difference, but. I just think it has to be thought about, but it is age and stage appropriate, of your players. But you got to think, okay, if I'm going to ask a player to do an exercise that maybe is around finishing that requires some acceleration onto the ball, and I've got 15 players, but I know 2 of those players aren't particularly good at acceleration, well, what are they going to get out of this compared to the other players? The other players are going to look sharper and better because they're quicker with that particular physical literacy. They might have the same finishing technique, but just they're going to get away with it more or less because they haven't got the acceleration to go with it. And can you support that? Obviously, one session's not going to fix anything on its own, but how can we keep working on that? Or could we have an activity in which it brings out different physical literacy abilities? So I can work on someone's coordination, somebody else's balance, and somebody else's speed, or someone else's strength. I think there's if you can think about it as a coach and you can build it into your sessions, it can only be a better session, right? And again, with a longer term, if I'm not the quickest player in your team, but you're doing things to help me get a bit faster and looking at my technique in certain ways, that's going to give me 6 months of that. I'm probably going to be a better player.
Yeah, I agree. I think embedding it in the session is important. I think the challenge is how you do that. To me, and that's something that I probably struggle a little bit with. But yeah,
good point. Okay,
all right. Should we move on to number 6?
Yes.
Okay, so number 6, game-based practice. I know this is probably your most favourite topic. I'm not sure why I'm going to talk through it. You probably should do, but I'm going to have a go. So I think this is like a massive subject. We could have a separate kind of podcast, or we will. Yeah, I'm sure we will actually. Yeah, if you get your way. So I think I do a lot of game-based practices, small-sided games. And I think with different constraints. So, for example, even last Saturday I had 2 3 versus 3 games going on, and that was constrained by, or actually, maybe constraints are not the right word for that game, but it was called passing for points. So the more passes you do before you score, the more goals you get. Right, and it just encouraged the players to kind of move the ball and find space and pass the ball. And And I think it's just a wonderful way of coaching, because you just transfer it. It transfers into the game. I know you don't play 3-on-3 on Sunday, but it's certainly parts of that just transfer into the game. It's directional. It's kind of all of the above, right? It's just for me, it's the way that most of your sessions should be run. I don't. My personal view is that I don't have my whole session games based. I have some practices. I have some technical work, and then a vast majority is games based. But it's just a great way of doing it. You can introduce individual challenges there in those kind of games as well. I just think it really it helps the players develop with presenting them with problems they've got to solve. I think it's just critical, and I think it's really come to me over the last couple of years how important that side of it is. And I think and I also think you read a lot more about this now, right? The podcast you listen to, the books you read, there's a lot more on game-based practice, and it's less around the old-fashioned drills, I would say. It's definitely that's something that's come into fashion.
Yeah, I guess as a concept, it's been around for a long time, from teaching games for understanding, but maybe it's been misunderstood a lot as well. I mean, and I've seen your practices, and I use this a lot. I'm a big fan of it, but I don't just throw a ball in and say, right, off you go, boys, go and play. And it is, I think it's trying to be clever with the constraints you put in, or the way you manipulate a particular game to bring out your theme or your coaching points again. And that was a great example with the points for passing, because the players don't know you're looking at their passing technique and what you're trying to do. They're just playing the game. But in that game, it gives you a great opportunity to watch and see in a real game environment, okay, who's doing this straight away? Who's got it? Because actually, if they've got it, brilliant. I've got someone I can refer to as a bit of an example, and they're doing it under the pressure of a real the randomness of a match. So I'm more likely to see that when we come and play in a proper match in a league. Or likewise, if the player hasn't got it, right, okay, I can see what is it decision making, is it positioning, is it technical ability, what is it? I can see that first before I try to help them improve on it. Because if we're just doing the technique first, well, maybe they can do it, or maybe they've got their own technique, but actually it's a bit different to what you thought it was going to like, but it works for them. So yeah, I'm a big fan. I remember doing this with under sixes, and and I'm sure there'll be coaches that will know this already. But you read the stuff and you look at the things that say, actually, under sixes do not pass the ball. Give it up, Scott. They ain't going to pass the ball in a million years. Yeah. We played a game 3v3 with headbands, and the only rule was you only win once your team has each got a headband on its head. You can score as many goals as you want, but you get headband when you score a goal, and when all three players in the team have got a headband on, you're going to win the game. So inevitably on a team, especially under sixes, 3v3, you've got one or two stronger players that can dominate and go and probably score 10 goals on their own quite easily, but they soon learn quite quickly, actually, I've got to share the ball. Yeah, and it's a way to share the ball. And what they end up doing is dropping back a little bit deeper and letting the other player who needs to get the goal move forward. So the game's allowed to, and that's the under six. These are 5-year-old kids doing it. So I think if a 5-year-old kid can pick up a concept, then I'm sure any of the players can. And it's the game that's doing it. And if they can't technically pass a ball, and I can see that in the session, well, that's up to me to work on that and help the player in that way to do that. But they tend to find a solution to the problem when you just give them the problem and not the solution, with a bit of time and encouragement.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think the interesting discussion, and maybe it's not for now, but actually, if you as you're doing, in this approach, if you have a certain player that maybe isn't kind of technically as strong as some of the other players, and is really struggling maybe with first touch or with passing or something like that, and they clearly need repetition to help them, would you then pull them out of that game? Probably not immediately, right? But would you think then future weeks maybe we need to do some constant practices? And I think the answer is probably no. That's what you're going to tell me. But I would think about doing like a constant practice where that person's getting a lot of high repetition, or I'd encourage them outside of the session, keep practicing this, keep doing this, and help. That might help them develop more perhaps than just doing a games base where they haven't quite got that repetition.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and I'm not against doing unopposed, constant practices. I think I just wouldn't go to it straight away. You know, you dial down a little bit, maybe. Yeah. Actually, maybe take them out and you play them in a 3v2, so they've got a bit more opportunity, you know, a bit more space. You know, even a 3v1 or something. You know, I would look at the game first if I could, and I would try and think of clever ways. And I'm not that clever or creative, but I would try and think of clever ways in which we could still do it in a game format. But you're dead right. If it's not happening, and we've got to go back to basics, and we've got to do a constant, and I can try and find a way of doing that, you know, hopefully in a fun way, then if that's what the player needs in their best interest, then 100% it's going to be done. And there's certainly times for that, but I think you can dial the game a little bit as well. You know,
fair point.
And also I've seen it, you don't always have to take all the players out and do all the practices, because that's what one or two players needs. Keep the game going and take a few out and do a small game. You know, you could have a whole part hole where the holes are going on with the games happening either side, and you've got a little part practice going on in the middle. Well, they will do the part practice, nobody knows they're being singled out, but you might spend a bit more time with those players that need a bit more of that, you know, that isolated time, you know, not on their own, but maybe two or three doing the same thing, because they're a little bit behind on that particular part of their development. So it's just, again, being creative and clever. But I think if you can think of how to make a game out of the stuff you're trying to get across, I think it transfers well. The players enjoy it, you know. And I don't think that's a foundation phase thing. You know, we still play a little bit of football, and I play because I love playing football. We enjoy it, right? And I think if you're 16 years old, you want to play football. You know, so if I can do this stuff in a game and it just feels like a game to me, I'm probably going to work a bit harder. Probably going to enjoy it more, put more effort into it, and actually I'm probably going to pick up things that I can transfer better on match day. So, happy player, happy coach.
Yeah, agree. Agree.
All right, number 7.
Yes.
Ball rolling time. Okay, I don't think it's going to be a long one, but let's just say I do think you've got to have a conscious thing about your sessions about ball rolling time. You're not going to set yourself a percentage or a number of minutes and stuff like that, but just be conscious of it, because, you know, I see good coaches, and even myself, I challenge myself not to have an intervention longer than 30 seconds. You need ball rolling time. You know, talk to the players while they're grabbing a drink. Don't have a drink and then spend 3 minutes talking to the players. If you're talking to your players for longer than 2 or 3 minutes, forget about it. They're not listening. I promise you, they've gone. You know, there's just no point. If you can't get your point across in 30 seconds, well, you've got to think of a different way of getting your point across that's not verbal, because they're not going to be listening to you. And maybe that's a general statement, but you know, from my experience with the players that we have, and that's not, I think the young ones are better listening to some of the older ones sometimes, so it's not an age thing necessarily that gets easier as they get older. I just think ball rolling time. Think about, you know, how you set your practice up. Does there need to be a cue? Can we have 2 practices going on so the cues aren't there and it's kind of flowing a bit better? Can we do a wave practice if it's not going to be a game thing? You know, if I'm stopping and talking, do I need a whole intervention, or can I pull a player and have a little word and put them back in again? Again, it's all techniques, but that ball rolling time is crucial, because the more time the ball's rolling, the more they're working, the more they're getting the physical exercise out of the session, the more they're getting more touches of the ball, probably the more they're enjoying it, the less you've got to speak about stuff as a coach. So it's hard to measure, but be honest with yourself and say, if I can't, you know, if I'm getting below 80% of ball rolling time, probably need to look at what I'm doing, you know, or can I improve that somehow? And there'll be certain sessions of practice that will lend itself to less ball rolling time, and conditions. If it's freezing cold, then you want to get that ball running as much as you can. It's snowing here today, but if it's summer, it's 90 degrees, maybe you can have a bit longer and you can slow the pace of the session down a little bit. But just be aware of it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you're a coach and you've only got your players for an hour, right? If you've got 20% of the time you're doing the talking, that's 12 minutes out of that hour that you're losing. So I think it's really, really, really important. I know it's, when I've done my level 2, it's something that as I was having my in situ visit, it's something that the kind of assessor, they're not an assessor, the feedback coach from the FA was looking at how much ball rolling time, and you actually get that feedback at the end of the session. This is what your ball rolling time was.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And I think I was about 79%. So
that's poor. Whole 1% off.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think the point you make around being a little bit clever, like the players get a drink, talk to them while they're having a drink, right? Position yourself so the sun's in your eyes when you're talking to the players, not in the players' eyes. Position yourself so you're kind of there's not a game of football right behind you, so they're looking at that. It's just these kind of little things that just will make your chats with the players quick, done, snappy, bang, we're back out doing something, right?
Use visual aids if you can, rather than words, you know, demonstrations, whiteboards, micro pictures, you know, just use cones to set it up if you can. If you've got to explain something, then a picture paints 1,000 words, you know, don't just try and talk through it. So just being clever with it, right? Yeah,
and I think just when you're using players, make sure you use as many players as you can over the season, for example. You're always going to have one or two boys which are technically stronger, that generally they're probably your go-to players, and if you want to do a demonstration, but you want to help all the players, right, in terms of their self-esteem and their confidence. So you're trying to use different players each time you do it. But
yeah, very good point.
Okay, I think we've probably done enough on ball rolling time. Our podcast rolling time is pushing on. Okay, next one is decision making. Again, I know this is a big one for you, and it's a big one for me. I think this is kind of critical, right? You've got to present your players with problems that they need to solve. I think it's the optimal way that they're going to learn and develop and remember. You have to be presenting them with problems. There's different kind of coaching styles you can use to do this, right? And it's again on level 2. And I know when you've done your kind of youth badge that they talk about guided discovery, trial and error, question and answers, one that I use quite a bit. All of these different things, not being directive and kind of telling the players, asking questions. And it's the same, it's not just training, it's matches as well, right? This is in matches you see that perhaps the player made the wrong decision, or what you perceive as being the wrong decision on the ball. You ask them, I guess, firstly, why did you make that decision? And then secondly, what could you have done? What else could you have done? And generally the player will come back and say, I should have passed it, or I should have shot, or I I had a one-on-one opportunity, I should have been more direct and positive for the ball. So I think it's really, the more you present problems for the players to solve in training, the more you're going to see that coming through when in competitive matches on a Sunday morning. And again, it comes back to what we spoke about earlier, this constant variable, random, opposed versus unopposed type practices. The more variable and even more, the more random practices you've got in there, the better it's going to be for players in the longer term.
Yep, totally agree. I think it goes back to planning, because actually your theme of your session or your theme within your planning could be a question, could be a problem. So what problem would I like the players to focus on today? You kind of think, and you kind of build around that. What's the problem that we could face in a game, and how the player's going to solve it, and give them the problem first. That might be overtly you told them the problem, or you just introduce a game in which the problem's there for them to solve, and you see how it unfolds. Obviously, you need the technical points within you to be able to support your players, if they're not solving the problem. But if you go straight in with the solution first and then present the problem afterwards, to me it just feels like the wrong way around. The learning's not so deep. If you could, you're kind of getting into pedagogy here, and the science of actually educating, and child development, things like that. But the gut feel is, if the players can solve the problem themselves, then that's going to stick a bit more than you giving them the toolbox of potential problems they may face, and they kind of have to kind of use it if they can. And
I think it's great, right? You're asking questions of the players, and you actually see them thinking it through, and actually when they come back with answers, they just look, and you say, you're absolutely spot on. You can see how delighted they are when they kind of answering these questions, right? And I think it creates a bit of positivity again.
It is that silence time. That's the moment the learning's happen. And I think as coaches we can be scared of quiet sometimes. But I'd say if you've got quiet for 10 seconds, that's the learning there. That's what's happening. They might not get it, but that's the cognitive stuff and the little wires collected up inside that they're going to get it, And if they don't, fine, send them back out again. Give them a bit longer, rather than give them the answer, give them a bit longer to solve it themselves, because they will. I think we can be guilty sometimes as coaches of underestimating the players as well and what they're capable of doing. If we give them just enough time, you don't want them drowning, but you kind of want them just splashing around a little bit, so they're having to struggle a little bit, so it's uncomfortable a little bit, but not too uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think the other thing is, how do you, in a team, you have players which are maybe kind of extrovert. Some players are introvert, even at young ages, right? Some you'd have maybe the same person trying to answer every question. Yeah. And it's the players that are not answering it. It's then you need to kind of maybe go to them and ask them, and generally speaking, they will know the answer, or they will get there quite quickly, but they just don't give it to you. Yeah. And I think it's then, as a coach, you're there for all the players and really trying to bring it out of all the players, not just the ones that want to answer it kind of straight out and shouting the answer out or putting their hand up first kind of thing.
It's a great point. And finally, I just need to say you're right, because actually with decision making, I hadn't thought about it, you just said that then, but I think, you know what, if you if you just focus on solutions, then the technical players will probably stand out. Or the physical players, or both will stand out. So the less technical players, the less physical players might just be in the background a little bit. It's this confidence thing. If you give them problems, actually, sometimes that's cognitive issues they've got to oversolve. So it's not just the ability to do it. It's actually what am I trying to do and how am I going to get it done quickly. And then you'll see different players shine at different times depending on the problems that's there. Because it might be an attacking problem, defending problem, passing problem, or a transition problem. But different times, different players will shine because the problem's creating the opportunity to stand out rather than just a technical solution.
Yeah.
So then you get the confidence, and over the longer term, suddenly you've got all your teams a bit confident. You've not got one or two players you think, well, they could be a great captain, they're a leader, they are. You've actually got a team of them because you've given them the opportunity to be able to have their moment.
Yeah. And as coaches, right, it's not just you're coaching them to play football, but you want to help them externally as well. And I think this is kind of great ways of helping them being more confident in general. It's
character building, right?
Character building, yeah. I agree, yeah.
Okay, number 9, is that me?
Yes.
The environment. Oh, this is a huge one. I mean, it's huge, and it sounds maybe too huge to be actually an ingredient, but you can't ignore the environment. I mean, I think we have to do something on this as a separate podcast because this is a massive thing. Yeah. And there's a lot about it at the moment. There's some really good stuff out there. But you've got to think about your culture, and it's not just words, but what is your culture? What are you about as a team, as a collective, as a club, probably? Although that depends on the type of club you're in. What philosophy have you got? But what are your values? How do you communicate that? And the most important thing I think about the environment, the most important thing that will make the biggest impact is what habits you've got. Good and bad. What are your habits? Because they'll be the thing that determine your outcomes in the long run. What do you do week in, week out? Because you are what you practice. You are what you practice. So, and we don't always get it right 100%. And there'll be, good sessions, bad sessions, good weeks, bad weeks. But if your core habits are pretty good, you're going to do all right over the longer term. Yeah. And you can't have an environment that just bounces around from week to week to week to week. So this week, we could be very disciplined and very strict. This week it's all fun and games. And this week, mistakes are fine. This week you can't make a mistake. It's not the way it's going to work. You need to know, okay, who are we? Make sure the players understand that, and the parents, if necessary, depending on what age and stage you're at with them. And it's part of what the club's after and stuff. But if you get that environment right, a lot of the other pieces of the puzzle just fit into place.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think environment is just critical, right? And again, not just in football, it's in life in general. If you get the right environment at home for your kids and things like that, you get the right environment at work. You get things done. I just think having that environment's right, and I think the important thing you mentioned there is actually ensuring that the parents are on the same page and they're aware of that environment or what you're trying to embed in your sessions and in match day and things like that is critical. And one of the things that I've done with my team is we have a code of conduct. So we have a code of conduct for parents, we have a code of conduct for players, and we have a code of conduct for coaches as well. And that's shared with all the players, with all the coaches, with all the parents. And I've shared it with the kind of other teams that operate in the age group as well, so they can see what we're doing and what we're about. I just think having that environment right, having boundaries, players know where the kind of boundaries are, having that, I think respect is a word and that we could use. And I just think it allows, it creates the right development, not opportunity. Space, yeah. I just think it's just very important. And it is a massive topic, and we must do a separate session on it because I think there's so much we can cover in this, and I just think it really, really is important.
Back to your code of conduct point, Mark. Yeah. It's a good point you make, and a lot of clubs and teams have code of conducts. Yeah. Now I know, and I know your players, and I know your parents, and I know you. What you do with that is you live and breathe it, and that's exactly. I think is the difference. And I'm not, that's the truth. You do, and that's why you've got a great connection with the players. You get the most out of the sessions. The parents are on board and they get it, which kind of that's can have creative issues if they're not. And you did it really well. And having the code of conduct is one thing, but you've got to live and breathe it.
Yeah,
you've got to live and breathe it. Yeah. And then what you actually get is the most out of your training sessions because every minute counts then. Well, I'm not saying what the code of conduct should be or what you should focus on, but actually, if you've got one and it's the one that you believe in, you're going to get so much more out of those sessions because people come with the right mentality and mindset to be able to do the things that are important to you as the coach. Yeah,
agree. Yeah, and I think if you can set that stall out early on in the when you kind of take on a team, or certainly at the start of every season, that's what I do, is kind of set expectations and with the parents, so everyone's on board, everyone knows what what's going to going on, make sure that communication's clear and concise.
And consistent.
Consistent, yeah. I think it's really important. And probably maybe I over-communicate a little bit with the parents.
Better too much than not enough, I'd say.
I agree, yeah. So that's an interesting one. And actually, I think for a future podcast, managing parents, or maybe managing is the wrong word, dealing with parents is an interesting discussion point. By the way,
you are very good at that.
I'm not so sure about that. Okay, moving on to the kind of last one. And I guess it's a good place to have it at the end because it's reflecting and reviewing your session. I think this is a really underrated part of coaching, actually, and it's one probably I really started to do this more since I went through my level 2, and I've gone through the new level 2, I guess, and it was something that was really kind of drummed into us. In as part of the level 2 is really taking time to reflect on your session. What went well? What didn't go well? What could you do differently? And even to the point where I would go through after each training session and just document, right, these are the things that I think I need to work on next time. If I do this practice again, actually, what could I do differently? I think it's just really, really important. And I think even if you can get, and I know we've kind of gone through this, although we are a bit keen, but doing peer-to-peer feedback, if you can get a coach to come and watch your session or video your session, and you can then take their feedback, and then you can look back at the video and say, well, actually, my ball rolling time was only 50% this week. I've done way too much talking. Or actually, the gaps between the session or between the practices or the games were too long. Or the intensity wasn't high enough this week, or my coaching points didn't come across as well as I wanted them to. I think it's just a really, really important part of your session, which I think, as I said, is underrated. A lot of coaches don't do this, and I'm guilty. I don't do it as much as I should do. But I always try to, even if I don't document something after the session, I always try to think back. Right, how did that go? Did that go as well as I wanted it to? What parts went well? What didn't go so well? So I think it's an important thing, really important part.
Yeah, it is, and it probably is the bit that's neglected the most. And the point you make about actually getting somebody else's feedback, you reflect your own sessions, and you could be your own worst kind of critic, can't you, about your session? But you don't see it all, and you might be right in what you're thinking, or you might be wrong, or you might be missed some really good stuff that you couldn't see yourself, or you might have missed some really important stuff. Particularly with the players. I mean, you've got one set of eyes and maybe 15 players out there, so you can't see everything all the time. And there's nothing like a video or someone else saying, well, actually, you know what, you missed a little moment there where little Mark was over there and he did a wonderful little Joe Cole turn, and you were saying well done to somebody else 3 times but missed his, like, little things that you can just miss. And you're never going to be perfect, but the more you can kind of get feedback and input into honest feedback and input into what you've done and the sessions, then the better. And whacking the video on and videoing yourself is a good way of doing that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, a lot of we're fortunate. One of our kind of parents videos the games on Sunday, and I get to look back and observe actually what did we kind of do well this week, what didn't we do well as a team. I guess it's not specific to my kind of coaching, although I can hear myself in the background talking to the players, so there's lessons that I learn from that. But it's a great tool. Videoing is a great tool. Yes, no, I don't do that anymore. But it's a great tool. So yeah, really important.
Yeah. So I think we've covered all the 10 points. So we'll go through them again quickly. Just to say though, these aren't the things that are gonna. You can't say, right, I'm going to do these 10 things and then I've got a session. This is kind of like the overview of what you could put in the session to make it kind of hopefully get the most out of it. So number 1 was planning. Number 2 was have a clear theme. Number 3 was, if you can, use free play. Number 4 was have some technical work in there. Number 5 was think about physical literacy for the players. Number 6 was using game-based practices. Number 7 was think about your ball rolling time. Number 8 was creating decision-making opportunities as much as possible for the players. Number 9 was think about the environment. And number 10 was obviously reflecting and reviewing on the session.
Yep.
So final thoughts, Mark?
So look, I think we've kind of gone through what we think are kind of important, right? But maybe there's things that perhaps we've missed out. I'm sure there are things that we've missed out. So I think we're here to kind of, I guess, we kind of love talking about coaching, right? I think it'd be great to kind of get some feedback on our views, and we're open to kind of being educated 100%. We're not experts by any stretch of the imagination. We're kind of amateur coaches that are kind of trying to get more experience and improve our sessions to help develop our players. So please take some time to kind of reach out to us and let us know where you think we can improve on this.
Yeah, I think our coaching is like our podcast. It's very much a work in progress, isn't it? So,
yeah,
that's a fair point, Mark. And, we're certainly not trying to preach to people out there saying, look, these are the 10 things you must do or you will fail and these are all the right answers. These are the 10 things we feel are important in a coaching session. We'd love to see if you think you agree or not, or if you've got better ones that we can try ourselves. We'd love to do that. Ultimately, we just want to improve our coaching practices and give our players the best possible opportunity to be the best they can be in the most fun environment, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And how can people reach us then?
Good point. So we've got two main ways, I guess. We've got an email address, which you can get us at info@thesoccercoachingpodcast.com, which is very long, but it's if you can do that, that's great. Or even easier, if you're on Twitter, you can get us at SoccerCoachCast. So either of those two avenues will reach us, and we will reply and respond back to you. We'd love to hear from you. If you're going to be critical, please be constructive, but we can take that as well. We're used to it. Yeah. But all feedback's welcome. But really technical stuff, any ideas you've got for particularly for themes we can cover in future podcasts, anything about this particular cast specifically. The hope is we've got one or two people we're approaching around this theme and who do this for a living, and what their thoughts are around an effective session. So that we'll hope to get out in the next few weeks. But any thoughts or feedback are very much welcome.
Yep, agree.
So finally, just to say that if you do like this episode, please do subscribe, because that goes a long way for helping us get our position in iTunes and get it out to more people. If you can give us a positive review, that's great as well. And hopefully you'll tune back in for the next episode. Thanks very much.
Thank you.